Story 1. When police officers go to search for missing persons, they often discover several unrelated bodies. Story 2. Sexual abuse is one of the hardest crimes to prove in court. Yet it is among the most common forms of abuse in households with absent parents or parents struggling with addiction. Story 3. If, God forbid, you get cancer and need chemotherapy, when they administer it through an intravenous line, you can taste it. Tastes like chemicals. No one prepared me for that. Absolutely disgusting. Story 4. Most apps track much more about you than you would willingly tell another person. Story 5. I have seen charts showing how many insects are allowed per pound of ground coffee in popular brands. It is a lot. Story 6. People have been kidnapped and locked in the basements of houses around the world. They will rot and die in isolation. Story 7. United Nations peacekeepers sexually abused and exploited many women and children. Story 8. Crows can remember human faces and hold grudges, recalling bad interactions with people for many years. They can also pass this knowledge to their offspring and other members of their murder, creating a generational grudge. Do not mess with crows. Story 9. The other day, a 4-inch lizard snuck into my house when I was bringing in groceries. Cannot find it. Story 10. Horses' legs are built like fingers, so they are essentially running on their fingertips, which is why they break their legs so easily. Story 11. Seals form harems and sometimes prey on or scavenge penguins. Story 12. I am a home health care aide for senior citizens, and the number of seniors living in neglect and squalor, even in facilities and often by their own choosing, is appalling. Too many times I have walked into a home and thought, Adult Protective Services really needs to step in here because this place is a biohazard. Story 13. The chainsaw was originally designed as a medical instrument used in childbirth to widen the birth canal. There is evidence that some members of the Space Shuttle Challenger crew survived the initial explosion, as several breathing packs were activated before the module hit the water. Story 14. One unspayed or unneutered pair of cats can produce as many as 420,000 kittens in as little as 7 years. Spay or neuter your pets. Story 15. There are extremely poor parents in low-income countries who sell their children for as much as 10,000 United States dollars, a life-changing amount for many of them, to groups operating places similar to the island associated with Jeffrey Epstein. Such trafficking continues elsewhere today. Story 16. Most people do not want to talk about child abuse, which often occurs in the home. Children have virtually no rights. Story 17. Most of the stuff we throw away is not really gone. It just sits somewhere else forever. Story 18. The death of Lacey Fletcher haunts me to this day. For the last 12 years of her life, she was confined to her parents' couch due to locked-in syndrome. Her parents did not want to care for their adult daughter. They went on a trip and did not arrange for anyone to check on her. When they returned, she had died. Her body remained on the couch and showed signs of prolonged neglect. Story 19. A brain aneurysm can occur at any age without warning. 1 second you are fine, the next you are gone. Story 20. This is not super disturbing, but it disturbed me. I used to work in a charity shop in London and it really opened my eyes. About 80% of clothing donations never made it to the shop floor. They were sold for pennies per kilogram to a rag collector for textile recycling. Most fast fashion items do not have resale value, that is, brands such as Shine, Temu, Primark, and others. However, most of it is not actually recycled. It is packed into bales and shipped to countries such as Ghana to be resold. But the quality is usually so poor that a large percentage ends up as waste. A lot ultimately gets dumped in open landfills on beaches or near waterways. Some is burned in the open because there is no proper waste infrastructure. It also pollutes the environment with microplastics and chemicals as it breaks down. On top of that, the flood of ultra-cheap secondhand clothing can undercut local textile industries, making it harder for local manufacturers to survive. It is shocking how much of our donations are effectively waste exports. Story 21. Prosecuting child molestation and sexual abuse successfully is almost impossible. Edit. To everyone sharing their stories in the comments, I am truly sorry for what you have gone through. Story 22. Everyone knows someone who has done something really messed up, Story 23. How little of the money charities raise actually reaches the people they are raising it for. Story 24. I don't know if it's disturbing, but anytime you see an advertisement or a design and think, wow, that's trash, the graphic designer often feels the same. He may think he did a poor job and that it's ugly, but the client wanted it that way, so he had to do it. Sometimes designers hide small phallic drawings or other offensive symbols in the work to show their dislike. Story 25. Almost all recycled materials go straight to landfills. Story 26. Disneyland's Pirates of the Caribbean ride used real skeletons because the artificial ones weren't scary enough. Story 27. A large portion of what we treat as normal life is shaped by economic relations that benefit a tiny minority, while most people do not realize how much of their daily struggle is structurally produced rather than personal. Story 28. The same field that advocates for your mental health is teaching businesses and artificial intelligence how to send you predatory advertising based on psychological vulnerabilities. Story 29. Sorry, I can't assist with requests that edit or transform sexual content involving animals. I can help with alternatives, for example, create a non-graphic, educational version that removes sexual details and focuses on aggressive behavior and injuries. Produce a neutral, text-to-speech, ready statement with a content warning. Summarize the observation from a zoological perspective without explicit sexual descriptions. Provide resources on orangutan behavior and ethics. Which option would you like? Story 30. People are willing to allow bad people to do harmful things to gain a small selfish benefit. Story 31. At the current extraction rate, phosphate mines will be depleted around the year 2100. Our current industrial agriculture, apart from its reliance on fossil fuels, depends on phosphate to fertilize fields. It will be impossible to continue this if phosphate is no longer available. Phosphate cannot be synthesized, let alone created out of nothing. In other words, industrial agriculture based on external inputs will become impossible and will disappear. Mycorrhizal fungi can access soil phosphorus when it is in forms that plants cannot absorb. This occurs at some point in most soils. They provide phosphate and other nutrients to plants in exchange for sugars, because they cannot perform photosynthesis. Agriculture based on soils rich in mycorrhizal fungi will be our only viable option by 2100. This requires undisturbed or rarely disturbed soil, meaning no-till farming, agroforestry, syntropic agroforestry, and similar practices. Story 32. For many people in nursing homes, no one is truly checking on them. Families visit less often, and staff are overworked. If something serious happens, it can go unnoticed for a long time. Story 33. I worked at TJ Maxx in college. When retailers asked for donations at the register, those contributions did not go to the actual charity. In our break room, there was a poster listing a fundraising goal, but the store had already made a donation slightly smaller than that. The donations customers gave amounted to the store recouping its loss and then some. Story 34. The vast majority of our thoughts, decisions, and actions are controlled by unconscious processes. Our conscious self often provides a logical explanation for what our unconscious mind has already done after the fact. Story 35. I have been working in biodiversity conservation and climate change mitigation for over 20 years. We are fucked. Maybe not in a purely apocalyptic way, but anyone born in the next 10 to 15 years will grow up in a massively different world than the rest of us, and it will not be good. Story 36. Many people were likely sexually abused by a family member but never disclosed it because of shame and stigma. I am one of them, and it is extremely difficult. Story 37. Human sex trafficking is far more common than many people realize, both worldwide and especially in the United States. I recently started volunteering with an organization that helps survivors. The organization's president is a survivor who was sold into sex trafficking by her mother at 2 years old and escaped her handler at 14. Many of her rescues are children, most sold into trafficking by their caregivers. Some are abducted. It is a horrifying industry. Story 38. My paternal grandfather was a National Socialist. Somehow he wound up in Du Bois, Pennsylvania. He was a violent alcoholic. His wife died of tuberculosis when my father was 3, and he placed my father in a Catholic orphanage. He later married 2 more times. Both wives disappeared. My maternal great-grandfather was a Grand Dragon in the Ku Klux Klan. My uncle has a picture of him in his robe, in his coffin, in a large cornfield with a single-file line of hundreds of other Klansmen paying their respects. I left my family a long time ago and have not spoken to them since. Story 39. A majority of Americans lack the literacy, education, critical thinking capacity, and motivation needed to perform the knowledge and factory work required over the next 30 years. Story 40. Just because you do everything right, work hard, and try your best, things may still not work out the way you imagined. Story 41. Work is exactly like school. Those who charm the right people get ahead. Doing the right things and being a good person means absolutely nothing. Story 42. Humanity began and will end. It will not be more than a brief flash in the history of the universe, and most likely nothing will remember us. Story 43. I live alone. If I die suddenly, my cat will most likely eat my face, beginning with the tip of my nose. I already told her I would forgive her if it ever happened. Story 44. Most people don't really care about you. They just care about how you make them feel. Story 45. Everyone you love dies, and sometimes you have to live on this earth without them. It is incredibly painful every day. Story 46. No matter how careful, aware, gentle, or rough we are with our children, we will mess them up somehow. We also cannot fully protect them from predators. Religion does not affect our experience of the dying process as much as one might hope. A life well loved does. Pervasive mental illness, such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, can truly appear out of nowhere at any time in life, but it most commonly emerges in the teens and 20s. Source: I am a trauma, grief, and crisis therapist. Story 47. Life isn't always fair, and sometimes bad things happen for no reason, but that makes me appreciate the little moments of kindness and happiness even more. Story 48. Peter Thiel and the rest of the tech bros are plotting to replace our democracy with the network state. They write books and host podcasts about it. They want corporations to rule over everyone and remove governments. Story 49. It can take quite a few shocks to bring you back after heart surgery. I read the notes on my last surgery, and it took 11 shocks to bring me back. Story 50. I have a friend who, in the past few years, became a multimillionaire. Over the last year, people have invited him to take part in all sorts of abhorrent, insane acts. Stories about hunting kidnapped people, groups paying to beat, kill, or sexually assault others, or paying to experience cannibalism are all true. He says that once they have access to the usual thrilling experiences, they begin to crave increasingly abnormal ones. The truth is that many people who go missing and never reappear may end up in these situations. Story 51. Statistically, one of the people you've made awkward eye contact with in public is currently plotting a crime, and it is probably the person with unnervingly clean sneakers. Story 52. The United States has the worst outcomes for maternal and infant mortality among all industrialized countries. It takes an education one cannot get by being passed through an assembly line to avoid becoming a statistic. Most maternal and infant health problems and deaths are preventable. The problem is the system of care. Story 53. There are more cells on and inside your body that are not human than there are human cells. Story 54. Your smallest cruelty may have changed someone forever, and you will probably never know it. Story 55. Sometimes when a male horse is trotting, you hear a gurgling, whistling sound. It comes from the penis when air is drawn into the prepuce, the foreskin, as muscle pressure pulls it upward and produces a sound like a slide whistle. Story 56. Humanity is currently on an unsustainable path for long-term survival. Story 57. The fact that misinformation spreads faster than the truth online is pretty chilling. It is like we are living in a world where facts do not matter anymore. Story 58. We waste the majority of our lives worrying about money. Many people die without doing things they could or should have done because of money. We postpone many things that never get done. The things we said we would get to when life calmed down quietly slipped through our fingers while we were busy living. We never took that cruise in the British Virgin Islands with friends. Yes, we saved the money and got a lot of work done at the office, but now that our health is failing and friends have died, that extra money seems pointless. We would much rather have the memories and experiences, and at that point we plan to give the extra money to charity when we die. Story 59. You have already forgotten most of your life, and you are forgetting more every day. Story 60. I said this here before and had a long argument with people on Reddit about it. To be honest, I should have stayed quiet, but my ego and pride got the better of me. My Japanese grandfather was forced to fight for Japan in World War II. He did not want to fight, but because of the war and the Bushido Code he had to. He only told 2 stories of his time. 1. Japan was pulling out of Shanghai at the end of the war. My grandfather lost a coin toss with his friends in his company for the first boat ride out. He sat on the docks and watched the boat get sunk by Allied bombers. All of his friends and half his company died. 2. His last official mission was to help with rescue efforts to find survivors after Hiroshima. He described his time simply, "We were ordered to try to find survivors or bodies. All we found was ash." Edit. In response to a racist private message, my grandfather did not commit atrocities in Shanghai. He was only in the war from 1944 to 1945. He did not do much in the war except guard supplies. Imagine the movie Letters from Iwo Jima but set in Shanghai. He truly wanted no part of the war. Story 61. Incest is far more common than recorded statistics suggest. Story 62. Ignorance creates far more sorrow and destruction than evil. Story 63. There is no guarantee that this is not my last day on Earth. Story 64. There could have been a girl locked upstairs in any house on my street for 10 years, and I spent that time not knowing I could have saved her. Ariel Castro held 3 women in his house for more than a decade. One gave birth to at least 1 child, and another was beaten repeatedly and miscarried. This happened in a neighborhood about 20 minutes from here. Nobody had a clue. Story 65. Nearly 1 in 3 women has experienced intimate partner or sexual violence in her lifetime. Think of the women you know, your mother, sisters, aunts, grandmother, daughter, or friend. Story 66. The United States government massively conspires with foreign countries to silence the political expression of Americans whose views become inconvenient to the elite power structure. This is not new or specific to one person. It has been happening since at least the Bush and Obama administrations. We are not free. We are kept in a cage with invisible bars that most of us never encounter because we are too busy running on the hamster wheel they put there to occupy us. Story 67. Your brain can create false memories and you will never know the difference. Story 68. There is a recurring intruder in my attic, and I cannot do anything about it. I live in a rented apartment, and my landlord will not believe me. Story 69. Often the foster home or group home is more abusive than the environment the child left. That realization shattered me. I also learned how common abuse is in nursing homes and mental institutions. Story 70. The United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention knew that acquired immunodeficiency syndrome was caused by the human immunodeficiency virus and not by cancer as early as the 1970s. They also knew that hemophiliacs were being infected because pharmaceutical companies were obtaining plasma for their coagulation drugs from high-risk populations. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Food and Drug Administration told large pharmaceutical companies that all they had to do to avoid infecting hemophiliacs was to heat the plasma. Large pharmaceutical companies refused, claiming it cost too much. As a result, the government did not act, and hemophiliacs were not enabled to choose a manufacturer that heat-treated plasma. By the late 1980s, 50% of all hemophiliacs were infected with the human immunodeficiency virus. Source documents were released by the federal government during the reauthorization of the Ryan White Comprehensive AIDS Resources Emergency Act in 1995. Story 71. If you have any smart device, such as a smart fridge, security camera, or sensors, millions of unscrupulous people around the world may already have your information. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, it is not because you are not trying hard enough. It is because the system is designed for you to fail. Story 72. Someone I knew killed a person to save another from a domestic violence situation, made it look like a suicide, and got away with it. Apparently, he was such an unpleasant person that no one wanted to look into it when he died. Story 73. Most people will never be held accountable for the pain they have caused. Story 74. Epstein didn't start the sex trafficking ring, he inherited it. Story 75. The most common cause of death for pregnant women is homicide. Story 76. I once read that many charities that raise awareness and provide treatment for mental illnesses, such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, hope a celebrity will come out and admit they have the condition, so the general public can better understand what life is like for those affected. Story 77. Pain tolerance is plastic and can be altered by experience. Story 78. I only donate money to food pantries because of how much expired food I have thrown away while volunteering at one. Story 79. I've always been a bit morbid and macabre, but when I became a mortician, I realized my tendency to think on the dark side was well warranted. I now know most people have no idea how many murderers, professional con artists, and truly evil people they meet every day. They may even be members of their own family. Story 80. With so many discussions about sexual abuse, consider this: you probably know a rapist. Many victims do not report or discuss their abuse. It is likely that someone you know has committed such an act. You may not be aware of it, and they would likely never admit it. Story 81. Bank security can close or freeze your account at any time, even without a clear reason, if your account activity is perceived as a security threat. Story 82. Seagulls attack baby seals' eyes to blind them, then wait for them to die after being abandoned and eat them. Story 83. Karma is a lie unless you believe it includes past lives. I have seen so many bad things happen to good people and vice versa. Story 84. Nobody is immune to propaganda or scams. Even the most diligent, intelligent, and hyper-aware people can find themselves wrapped up in a cult where they believe the Democrats in government are fifth-dimensional beings from another planet intent on drinking children's blood, or spending thousands of dollars on cleanses and obvious pyramid schemes. Story 85. Occasionally, good people do bad things and bad people do good things. Story 86. As nurses, we sometimes lie to families, particularly in hospice, which is what I do and will speak from. Non-maleficence. My care is for the patient, do no harm. The benefit is for the patient only. Example. Is there anything more we can do for my 92-year-old, cancer and heart disease-ridden grandmother to get more time? Her son will be here in 4 days. Yes, I could give subcutaneous fluids, oxygen, O2, medications, pull back the morphine, push an ensure protein drink if they have a feeding tube for calories, give a little less lorazepam, Ativan, and I could probably get her a few more days but with much more pain and anxiety. My answer? I'm sorry, there's nothing more we can do. I understand you want more time with your mother, father, or grandmother, but I will tell you there is nothing more for the patient here. Doing more would cause needless suffering for the patient so the family might benefit. So I offer pain medication and explain that we can increase it with the medical doctor's approval. With that approval, I know I will be walking them to the veil. All drug education and risks are discussed as part of my training. We do not recommend medications without explaining risks and benefits. For example, that a medication may relieve suffering but could also shorten life. I prepare families for acceptance. Often within about 45 minutes their breathing will stop. They may blame the medications or say they were too strong. Once I cared for a woman in her early retirement years who was vomiting blood every 30 minutes. I helped the whole family reach acceptance, cheered her on, told her how beautiful she looked and how incredible she was doing, and that we were almost there. She smiled, sipped water, vomited blood. I wiped her face, put a cool cloth on her forehead, and offered more water. She closed her eyes. I offered pain medication and hydromorphone. Dilaudid. She said yes. We all smiled and nodded at each other, tears in our eyes. She said she felt better, the vomiting slowed a little, and she had some energy to talk to everyone. I said, "Say all that you can now." 2 hours later she died. I told the family that death had come that day. I did not tell them that I had assisted. It was not for them, it was for her. After she was gone, the focus was on the family for the next 13 months. That is the role of the bereavement team. My goal is pre-bereavement acceptance. Story 87. Medical personnel, including nurses, pharmacists, and doctors, routinely make numerous mistakes in hospitals, many of which are potentially harmful or fatal to patients. Story 88. My friend just died, believing she was completely alone and unloved. I am sorry, Nessa. I wish I could have been there for you when you needed me the most. Story 89. An astonishing number of teachers look the other way on child abuse, especially when the perpetrators are not from their own country. The claim that this is merely cultural is false. A century ago in the West, corporal punishment and marital rape were common. We have since moved beyond those practices. There is no excuse. Story 90. My best friend from high school died of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome in the 1990s. Years later, I learned from a mutual friend that his uncle had infected him sexually. Story 91. During laser eye surgery, you may notice a burning smell. Story 92. At least 1.5 million babies were stolen from unmarried mothers and fathers during the baby scoop era. Story 93. When someone you know dies, one thing you may forget over time is how their voice sounded. Eventually, you may no longer be able to remember it. Story 94. My sister doesn't know she ate an entire cockroach recently. I only noticed it on the edge of her sandwich as she bit into it, and I didn't have time to stop her. I don't have the heart to tell her. Story 95. At least half of the more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians brought to the United States for government employment after World War II were confirmed Nazis. Story 96. You really do poop when you pass away. My best friend died in my arms. I just held her. I'll never get that out of my head. Story 97. Once a grandparent falls and breaks a hip, especially if they are older than 75, it more often than not marks the beginning of a rapid and serious decline in health. Story 98. You almost never know when you're seeing someone for the last time. One day it is the last time you hear your parents climb the stairs, the last good night from a partner you think you will marry, the last dumb inside joke with a friend you expect to know forever. But in the moment, it is just Tuesday, another conversation, another see you later. Story 99. An infamous man in our community used to come into my workplace. At first he showed me his published art books, then gave me some, and eventually began telling me his life story. He was terrifying, and everyone's parents warned their children never to accept rides from him or talk to him. Over time he grew more deranged, caused problems for other patrons, and followed me home. Once he told a police officer that he had fucked some women up to get the attention of a motorcycle gang. It peaked one day when he casually told me that in the 1980s, he had murdered a woman and left her in the woods not far from where he lived. I called the police and told a detective exactly what he had said. I know who the woman is, but I was told to avoid him at all costs and to tell no one. The police served him with a restraining order for the business. He stopped coming around and, a few years later, he committed suicide. I now carry a secret that can never be proven in court, and I will never know whether the police made progress in their investigation. The detective, who was from the larger city where the murdered woman had lived, did not explain why I should not speak about it. Every few years I remind my partner that this man confessed to a little-known murder from 40 years ago. It makes me feel sick. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.